So excited to get some insight into the editing of HBO's The Last of Us today with my guest here, Tim Good, on the Hollywood Editing Mentor podcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. It's a real pleasure to be here.
I'm just so excited to be able to chat with you today about The Last of Us. I mean, wow, what a show. I mean, it's just been amazing. And I mean, I like I told you, it was one of those shows that, ever since it was announced, I was like, oh, this is going to put it on my list because I could not wait. As a fan of the game, was just super pumped to watch this. And so far, it's been amazing.
I'm so happy to hear that. We really put everything into it. So it's just a pleasure to see that it's translating to so many people.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, and we're going to get talking about episode 3 here in a little bit because, wow, what an episode. I mean, I like I told you, I was getting even like, as I was watching it, getting messages from friends who were watching it as well. And it was just so heartfelt and just truly an amazing, hour of television, and even see it in the trades. Everyone's talking about it.
I mean, I can't ask for more than to have something we worked so hard on and care so much about have people really react to and feel and be moved by. I myself have been getting these fantastic sort of like little messages. And my favorite ones are honestly when people say, my mom called me this morning. And I'm like, that is my favorite. That is the best. So I literally cannot be happier than when someone says, my mom called me this morning. We talked about it. And I'm so happy about that.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely talk more about it soon. Before we get to that, though, in The Last of Us, I want to get to know you more. I want this audience to also get to know you as well. I mean, how did you get to the editing chair? I mean, like maybe share your path, your journey to now, say, editing some, really big shows.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been a long journey, honestly. I can start from the very beginning if you would like.
Absolutely. I want to hear it.
And the thing that really attracted me to film editing is that I've always been a very sort of introverted person / extrovert when I need to be, but mostly introverted. And growing up, I was surrounded by architecture, great architecture. I grew up in the just outside of Chicago in this town called Oak Park. And Oak Park is where Frank Lloyd Wright did a lot of his early works. And so I would actually go to these houses and I was like sort of mesmerized by these things. And they would have these things, these special blocks that you would use to build things. And I loved those. I had Lincoln Logs as a child, which is a very, it definitely dates me. But I was fascinated by building things. And I was also very moved by music. So both music and architecture were sort of the basis of where I got this sort of desire to tell stories based on building. And I feel that music has a real sort of backbone to editorial and how you make a story flow, giving it rhythm, giving it rise and fall, giving it, climaxes and denouements. And so all of those things sort of played together. And so I was really into piano as a kid, and I would build models of planes and things. It was something that I just loved doing, the amount of detail that would go into every sort of decision and of course you had instructions on how to build a model, instructions on how to play a piece of music. And so the next sort of logical step when I got to high school is my public high school had this amazing television studio that had a linear tape-to-tape editor. So
I use this
in Outset, preview, auto edit. And that was run by this fantastic teacher of mine named Don Lenny. And he recognized in me early on. He goes, "You are really good at this." And he said to me, "I'd like to have you come and direct a little thing for this day nursery in our hometown and edit it with this professional from the city." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he says, "Yes." And so I did, and I loved doing it. And he's like, "You're really good at editing. You're very good at this." And for whatever reason, it was just about building and creating an emotion in someone else that really just drew me in. So I really enjoyed the fact that I didn't want to really go too far outside of my little boundaries of my little world. I'm hugging myself right now because, again, I'm an introvert. So I went to Northwestern University, which is in Chicago, And I went there because I wanted to be an editor, which is the strangest thing. And you know, it was like, why there of all places to be an editor? And I said, well, I also am really freaking smart. So I also want to have a great education as well. And that was it just hit both sides. And so I took tons of film classes with some amazing instructors and professors and mentors. And mentorship is kind of the key here with your podcast, which is a huge part of my entire career. That I was mentored by people. And then I took that mentorship and I have turned it around and I have mentored myself so many times that I am now going to be probably going on my 11th assistant editor, who is previous ones have all become editors in some way, shape, or form. And I'm extremely proud of that fact. So when I got to Northwestern and learned all about editing, and I spent all that time doing all those things, it was great. And then I moved to Los Angeles and realized that it was really hard. And I didn't have a ton of money. I didn't have a ton of people that I knew. I knew a couple people from college that were there, but ultimately it's not from where I'm from, the Midwest. So I didn't really know a lot of things. I was lucky enough to have interned at a place called New Line Cinema in 95 and 96, but I interned in development of all places, which is the strangest possible place for someone who likes editing to go, because it's all about scripts and it's all about meetings and it's all about this and that. But I have to tell you, it was one of the coolest places to be at that time. That's when they were making Seven. That's when they were, gearing up to do the Lord of the Rings things. And I met a ton of amazing individuals. And what I learned ultimately from those 2 summers was I didn't like this. And I really loved editing. And so I asked them, I know you guys have a post-production department. And so I would love to meet with them. You know me. And I would love to just get an opportunity. And they said, oh, of course, we'll completely send you down their way. And they did. Everyone met me. And I was like, oh my God, my ship has come in. And then of course they said, we have nothing. So, but we'll keep you in mind. And I'm like, this is not good. And this is back in the day when you would write to all of the productions that were listed in the Hollywood Reporter print edition and Variety. They would have these films in production. So you'd literally write to the production offices and say, I'm looking for a job and this and that. And so I sent out, I think, 200 letters or something like that. And I got one response, which I was like, oh my God, I got one. And it was for a very small film, an independent film. And they said, oh, well, God, we really have no money. We're just hoping to give experience to people. And I'm like, well, that's going to be hard. But I was like, you know what? This is an experience and I need it. So I said, I'm doing it. And so I would do night work as an assistant editor overnight, learning things. And there was a wonderful editor named Nina Lucia, who was fantastic and would show me what she was doing. And I just found that editors and people in editing were very generous. And what I find amazing is that, everyone's like, editors are so invisible in the story and this and that. I'm like, not really, in my opinion, because I feel like the inner life of an editor really comes through in the films that they cut. I feel like their lives are put on screen in a way. And in many ways, yes, of course, there's a screenplay. And yes, of course, there's a director. And of course, there's cuts that everyone is asking you to make. But at the same time, I always can sense when the edit has been done from this place of this interior life. And I really, really just love that little sort of glimpse into that artist. So anyway, after that, nothing was going on. And then miraculously, New Line calls me and says, hey, we have these 2 projects that need post PAs. Can you come in and interview for each one? I'm like,
sign me up.
Anyone. I'll do anything. I need to make money. I have no more. I have no more savings. I have to do this. And so it was kind of great. So they said, oh, all right. So first movie you're going to meet on is American History X. I'm like, I'm in.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm in. I'm in. And they said, okay, great. And so you just have to go meet the other person. Because I'm thinking to myself, this is an amazing story, amazing filmmakers. And I think the editor at the time was Alan Hyme. And I'm like,
wow, legend.
I'm ready to go. Yeah. I will do anything. And so I went down the hall and the other post supervisor, this wonderful woman named Claire O'Brien, she says, well, I'm doing this movie and it's called Lost in Space. And it's a science fiction thing. And I said, okay. She goes, and we're actually non-union. So if we need an assistant editor later on, um, you could actually potentially get hired. So I just like realized right then and there that pragmatism was what I was after. So I said, absolutely, this is what I'm doing. And again, an amazing experience. I learned from so many different people, including the editor Ray Lovejoy, who died a few years after the making of that film. He had done, The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Aliens, the original Batman with Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton, a few films. But he was so gentle and so generous. I remember specifically, because this is like, we're talking 25 some years ago. It was 3 weeks in, I was the PA, and he took everyone to lunch on my behalf and gave me this basket of gifts. And I'm like, why? And I never forgot that. In fact, I still have that basket. It's like right outside the store, because it was just the first sort of moment of pure, just true generosity from someone who I had so admired. And it was really just a wonderful experience. And true to form, they did need an assistant editor near the end because they were racing and they needed someone working. Basically, they had a 12-hour person on, then another 12-hour person on. So I became the 12 hours at night. And I was happy to do it because it got me into the union. And it was a spectacular experience to be able to get into the union so quickly, because it is a challenge to get in. And everyone has their own story, and I'm really grateful that I got an opportunity as early as I did. At a certain point, I realized that I was a pretty good assistant editor. And I was I was detailed. I could build things. I learned how to do music. I learned how to do sound effects to help the editor out. Because at that time, there's only one avid to be shared between the editor and the assistant. So you had to come in early and stay late in order to help the editor out. So I was happy to do that because that's what you do. And then I met my mentor, and his name is Norman Buckley. And he is an incredible, incredible person. And not just an incredible person, but he's an amazing editor, now director. And he's funny. He says, do you want to be editing? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, why aren't you doing it? I said, because I'm helping out, doing this, doing that. I'm doing all this that needs. He goes, you should just be doing it. And I said, oh, okay. And he goes, here and there, I'll throw you a scene if you'd like. He wasn't even the editor I was working for at the time. And I'm like, okay. So, and he would say, yeah. And if you would like some feedback, I would be happy to give it to you. And then this was on a show called Fastlane. Again, classic television here. But still the greatest people. You never know what you're going to walk into, and you just try and do your best work. That's my theory. But Norman was really great, and he was an excellent mentor. And he basically at one point said, I'm going to go do this pilot for this show called the OC. And so I need you to finish this last episode of Fastlane for me. And so I think we should co-edit it together. And I was just, I couldn't believe he was asking, number one. And then it was like, I was terrified because now I have to actually put up or shut up. And I always had a keen sense of my own rhythms and my own feelings and how things should be. I felt, at the time you're young, you're deeply passionate about what you do, and you think that everything is correct and whatnot. And then as soon as I got in there, he was just like, nope, you're wrong. Nope, you're wrong. Nope, you're wrong. And it wasn't like you're wrong. He was like, why are you there when the story is here? And why are you there when this is happening? And what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I like this. And he goes, why do you like it? What is it? Can you explain to me why you like it? And what is it doing to serve the story? And so he was really, really, he had a great rigor about what the craft of editing was. And so when he was teaching it to me and showing me how things worked, he'd say, see why this is better than what you were doing. And he says, not that if you wanted to do it, you can do it. And he says, there are no real rules in a way, but there are pretty good ones that have been set in place for, decades. And there's a reason why they had them. It's because you had no ability to go back and make little digital changes. You had to do it on physical material. So all of these rules were codified so that you wouldn't waste time and money. So they had these very strong sort of storytelling rules that have come down for generations. And I was the benefactor of those things because, Norman was trained and mentored by other people, and amazing editors in their own right. So I'm the beneficiary of all this, this past knowledge. And so I can't tell you that how critical that was for me in order to build the craft that I use today. And it was just a stunning sort of year of being back in school, but in the best possible school for someone who wanted to be an editor. And at that point, the incredible people who were doing the OC, Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, were off. They were making another show. And they said, "Oh my gosh, after season 1 of the OC, we want you to go and be a full editor on another show." So, and it was called The Mountain. Again, classic television that everyone remembers. Still, to this day, I am so proud of that show because it taught me so much about simplification, about story sort of velocity. And there were directors who literally would say to me, "Oh, let me teach you how to use a wide shot." And I'm like, "I will let you." So, because again, I've learned that I don't know enough, and I'm not going to pretend like I know it all. And so I welcome any and all feedback to just sort of try and make the work better. And ultimately that's been my mantra, is this, like, I'm here for the story and I want to make the best possible story. And that first episode I did of The Mountain had Penn Badgley in it, who is the star of You, he's the star of Gossip Girl, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of his first roles. And it's great. And some of the work I did then is pretty much the same as how I would do it today. And so that started sort of my career as an editor. And I was able to gratefully come back to the OC in season 4 to finish the series with them. And I did the series finale as an editor. I did a series with Sean Cassidy called Invasion, which was a science fiction series. Again, 1 season, but again, learned from so many incredible people. And after the OC, they said, "We have this show called Gossip Girl that you would do a really good job with this pilot." And I was like, "Tell me more." And I said, I could totally do this. But after that, I kind of was able to stretch myself a bit, and I worked on Fringe. And after that, a friend of mine who I had done a small pilot for just between Gossip Girl and Fringe, Amy Holden Jones, she said, "I'm going to do this show called The Resident, and I really want you to do it. And I want you to edit it, and I'm going to give you opportunities to direct on it." And that's what happened. And so I did a little bit of work on The Resident, finishing in their 4th season, a little bit of work there. And then I did the Umbrella Academy season 3. And that led me in a way to The Last of Us in this strange way, where Craig Mazin has always been has been a friend of my husband's for many, many years. And he would come over to our house for dinner parties, but that was it. They were like screenwriting buddies. And he would come over and we'd have these silly dinner parties where you'd eat 70s food, or like try to eat 70s food. But it was pretty vile and gross and disgusting. But he's such a smart and funny person. It was always fun to have him. And so we'd have these little get-togethers, and we knew him as this comedy writer. And then Chernobyl came out, and I remember he showed it to us on like an Apple TV, it's like a little trailer of it. He goes, here's a little tease of what it is. And we all looked around and said, "Oh, you're not doing comedy anymore. This is incredible. This is like in top-notch filmmaking." And he goes, "Yeah, I think so too, but I hope so." And I said to him then and there, I said, "If you ever do something else, I would love to do it." And he's like, "Oh, you never know." And that's how The Last of Us comes up, is that he starts doing it. I said, "I would love to be doing this series with you." And he says, "Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's politics involved, and let me see what I can do." And so ultimately at the time, it was something I couldn't do for them because politics and whatnot. It's fine. I understand it. But near the end of their preparation process, an editor could not continue on because they had to finish another show. And I was just wrapping up Umbrella Academy 3. I was super close to the end. And so I was able to leave Umbrella Academy 3 and go and start on Last of Us. And that brings us to where we are today. I hope that wasn't crazy. You have every right to edit everything.
That was that was great. That's an amazing story. I love it. I mean, so many things to extract from that. And that's the thing, right? This is just a funny industry. Like, you never know where we're gonna end up.
Yeah,
right?
No, you never do.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Everyone has their story of how they got to a certain show, and it's like, I met this person, I went here and did this and then that. But it sounds like, though, you were just kind of ready from early on, just ready for opportunities.
I was open to them. Yeah, I was always open to them. I didn't know what my career was going to look like. And I sort of said to myself, don't worry about it. Just make the best decision you can at any given moment, and that's the path you're on.
Go with it. I mean, you just have to jump in, close your eyes, jump in, and here we go, right? I mean, that's going to really prepare you for what you're going to run into most of the time.
For sure.
And you talked a lot about, and mentorship and why it's important to you. I mean, it's a big part of your life, and obviously you also mentor, your assistants. What makes a good mentor? And also, I guess, how can people find the right mentor?
That is the $1 trillion question, and it's a great question. The experience I had with Norman and Matt was so monumentally important to me, and I guess because I'm a Midwest guy, that whole idea of I'm going to do for others what they've done for me, and that's a lot of that is my upbringing, my parents, and you always look out for other people, and so when they did that for me, I said, well, I have to do this for them now, for anyone coming up. And I'm a natural teacher. I actually am a professor at UCLA. I teach editing to directors and cinematographers in the grad program. And I've been doing that since 2008. Also because Norman Buckley, because he was doing it, and then he was becoming too busy as a director and was unable to be in Los Angeles for any periods of time back when you actually had to be present to be able to teach, as opposed to now where we can actually go from anywhere in the world, which I have done also. But I have been teaching there as well. And mentorship to me is critical because in a way, I feel like the introduction of digital editing systems has hurt the process of learning. And in a way, it's because the assistant editor is sort of no longer allowed to look over the editor's shoulder, is no longer able to sit with the editor and see what they're doing and learn what they're doing. And because there's so many other tasks, the assistant, I mean, I got to be honest, I would be probably a terrible assistant at this point because of the insane amount of work that goes into it. And the amount of technical mastery that assistants have to have. I'm in awe of assistant editors because of how much they do. But one of the things I know that assistant editors who want to be editors, and there are assistants who don't, and that's completely 100% great. And I've worked with them. I know them. They're some of my most lovely people in my life. But the ones who want to edit generally want some sort of creative integration in some way, shape, or form. And so I find that if there's a way for me to have them do that, give them the opportunity to do that, it's never a do this, it's a would you like to do this, then that's the way to do it. And because I feel so strongly that the only way that the art and the craft of editing gets passed on is through this sort of person to person. You can learn about editing, you can read about it, you can listen to as many shows and even this, and you can listen to this. But the real way to learn it is to watch someone do it, see how it's done, and then do it yourself many, many times, fall on your face 50,000 times, and get up. And that's the hard part. Sometimes you have to get up when it doesn't go your way. And not say that because there was a point where I remember in the OC sort of season, when at the end of the first season, I was just feeling like I wasn't getting it. And I just was like, you know what, Norman, I think I don't get it. I think I'm nope. I just really think that I can't figure this out because I'm still getting all these notes from you. And Norman is great because he just sort of had this grin on his face while I'm like confessing my intense fears. And he goes, "Really? You think that?" And I said, "Yes, I think that. I think I'm not good at this." And he goes, well, I have just wanted you to know that I think you're pretty great. And I've actually told them how great you are. And not only that, but I've been giving you all these notes just to remind you that it's not about what you do. It's about how you work and collaborate with others. And so I just didn't want to say that this was good and this was, worth it. I just wanted to give you more to do so that I could see how you would adjust and see how you could change things, And so of course it caught me way off guard. And I'm like, what do I do now? Now I like my whole psyche is crushed and yet uplifted at the same time. And so that that kind of reminded me that this is how you learn. Is that you do things and you fall down, you get up, and you keep trying. And so as a mentor myself, like I am very excited to watch an assistant or apprentice or even anyone. I invite anyone into my room, PAs, whatever. I'm like, you want to stay till 8, 9 o'clock at night and watch this? I'm happy to do it. I'm a night owl, so sometimes I start my days late. And it's just the way I am. I've tried to show up at 7 a.m. It's
not happening.
happening as the editor side of me. It doesn't work. But that to me is where it happens, and I'm happy to sort of take any questions the assistant has, like, oh, why would you do that? And I have a really good sense of now what my aesthetic is and what I value, and that comes from a combination of the craft that was sort of imbued with me with Norman and Matt, and my own instincts and my own feelings, which over time I've allowed to sort of come into my work even more and more and more. So I love the idea of seeing younger filmmakers and editors and directors even start in a certain way, and then they improve and they get better, and then the next thing you know, they're doing work that's on par, and then I go, you should be editing alongside me. So I have news for you, Joaquin, which is my assistant editor Emily Mendez on The Last of Us will be co-editing with me 4 episodes. It's not it's on IMDb, so it's not a secret, but she is a tremendous editor. And was and is a tremendous assistant editor. But I don't think she's going to be an assistant any longer because she's just too good. She's just too good. I can't. My whole thing is I can't push anyone who's at the top of their game to want to do something just so it's easy for me. I'm always like, all right, I got to find someone new. That's fine because I like it, because it's fun, and now I get to help someone else out. If they want it. But that's usually what I'm asking for when I interview assistants. I say, do you want to learn to edit? If you don't want to learn to edit, you're gonna have to try real hard, because I'm gonna want to tell you.
I think it's very important. I always tell people to put yourself out there, right? I mean, that's something that I learned from my mentor, one of my mentors, Monty DeGraff, AC, shout out to him. Yeah. When I first worked I worked with him on my first season of a full scripted show in Narcos Mexico. And I remember he took me out to lunch. And he's like, he told me, he's like, well, do you want to edit? And I said, yes, right? And he's like, well, you got to make sure you tell people what your goals are, what you want to do. And I just thought, at that point, I remember at that time, I was like, well, I guess, don't you just assume that I would want to edit as an assistant? And that's the thing, you don't. Not all assistants want to edit. But I think in general, what I've learned from that moment was that I have to tell people what I want to do.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's how, because I started doing that, really communicating to people like what my goals were. And then I started gravitating towards those other mentors and who are now some of my best friends. Right. But I think it really takes a lot, being vulnerable and be willing to learn, be teachable.
Yeah, no. And the word you use, vulnerable, there is very important, because it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to say, I don't know it all. I need your help. Or, I'm not sure how to do this. Because it's always like, oh, if I do that, they're going to think of me as not as good.
Exactly.
They're going to think of me as I'm not prepared, or this and that. And So it's really hard to do that. But I also think that vulnerability is the key to people wanting to help you. It's like, I don't know all this, but I know a lot. And so and a driven attitude with the combination of the drive and a vulnerability, I think, is something that is really helpful for an assistant, and anyone who's trying to learn more about being an editor. So I completely I love that. Monty is an amazing editor. So kudos to you. That's awesome. I always find that feedback from someone else is really helpful. So I always bring my assistant in and say, okay, here's a scene. Is it working? Is it this? Is that? Do you feel this? Do you feel that? Do you have this, that? What do you think is there something I'm not getting? Because I'm now too close to it. I have no idea if it's going to function for someone who's watching it for the first time. So I think it's incredibly valuable feedback to get, and it also gives them the opportunity to analyze and identify where things either work or don't work, because ultimately in the future, a director is going to ask you, why is this not working?
Yeah.
Why does this not feel right? And you are probably going to know because you've been asked so many different times. So it kind of works in this wonderful way where it helps me, which helps the show, which is the story, which is, again, all I really care about. I care about the producers, but in so much as that I care about their stories, if that makes any sense. Like, I want their stories to be the best possible stories that they can possibly do, because then it helps them. So and I want them to be as successful as possible. That's all we all want. We don't go into these things to just take a job, and we want it to be great. And whether or not it's going to be great or not, it depends on so many different factors. I've been lucky in a way that I have worked on some really great series. I mean, the OC was like such a big thing for so many people.
Yeah.
And to this day, I mean, I'm watching the last season again. I'm going to do an interview with Melinda Clark and Rachel Bilson for the OC podcast, which I'm so excited about. And I'm rewatching these things that I did like 15 years ago. And I go, I'm better now, but my instincts are the same. And so all the things I valued then are things I value now, which means my values haven't changed, which is good, I suppose. But my craft has just gotten better. And my sort of abilities to mold things have gotten even better. So it's just been really wonderful to sort of look back in those ways and see how you progress over your career, and to say, yeah, I would do it differently now. Of course, I do it differently now, but I still had that instinct at that time.
Well, we're seeing your amazing work here on The Last of Us. Again, congrats. I can't say how much I've been enjoying it. I know so many people have as well. So want to talk about now your work and your experience on The Last of Us. But let me ask you this. Did you play the game before you started working on it?
Oh, this is an excellent question. And I did not, which was not a controversial choice, really, but it was a choice. And in a way, I learned this from a couple of people in my past. When I was a producer on the Believe show for JJ, his producing partner, Brian Burke, said to me, he goes, "Don't read the scripts." I said, "What? Why would I not read the scripts?" He goes, "You need to come at these episodes with no knowledge of what's coming." And that stuck with me to this day, which is, I need to be able to see this without any preconceptions. So I remembered that, and I said, you know what? I'm going to choose, and if it gets me in trouble, oh, so be it. But I'm going to choose not to play the game. And I'm going to basically allow these dailies to some sort of wash over me, and I'm going to edit them in a way I feel is the way I would do it. And I was lucky enough that my assistant editor turned co-editor, Emily Mendez, was a huge fan of the game and has played it multiple times. It's like her favorite thing. So she would tell me at times, she goes, "Oh, that's like the game." And I go, "Oh, what's like the game?" And she goes, "Well, you're using the shots behind him where he's walking." And I said, "Oh, I see." She goes, "Yeah, that's very much like how the game is." So I was coming to these decisions without having played the game. But then I was aware of it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I didn't know anything else about these cut sequences, and we had the cut sequences to watch. We had them in the system, and I'm like, don't watch them, because if you might tell, like deep down it, I might make those same edits. But I almost wanted to come to them myself. And so there were times where, Craig and Emily would sort of just nudge me, and it's like, there's this one moment in the game where, and there's one specifically. It's like, well, when she says your watch is broken, the game moment is like she's passing by Joel and he's like sleeping on the couch. So I didn't have that. I had your watch is broken on camera, and then it cut to him. I said, let's just do it all in that one shot, because that's like kind of how the game is, and it's really kind of nice and elegant to have it all there. I said, oh, that's great. Let's do it that way. So there was, moments like that where I was sort of adjusted to sort of hit things that they felt were really good for how it would match the game. But overall, I just did it the way I thought it was to be done, and I guess in a weird sense of alignment, what I was doing was aligning with what they were looking for, which happens very rarely, and it's a gift. So this specific episode that aired last night was a true gift because I knew it was something that I was always wanting to tell a story like this, because I knew it was very personal to me. I knew how these experiences feel from a very, very unique perspective, and from my perspective, I knew I could tell these stories, and I could illuminate these specific nuances and subtext in these characters. So I could not have been happier to have read the script and to have seen how Peter Hoare directed it, and how Evan Bolter filmed it, and how Nick and Murray just literally blew my mind. And to see all of the subtext and the nuance that they imbued into their characters. And I said, I have to make sure that I don't miss this stuff. And I want to make sure that everything is on the table. Quite literally, there was a lot of table scenes, very critical ones, actually. And what was fun is that my first cut was like an hour and 45 minutes of the episode. I'm like, uh-oh, this is not good. It's funny because like the script, I think was like, I don't know, 60 some pages. So it wouldn't have necessarily been that. But all these great sort of lived in moments were sort of inflating what the script had said. Because, the script will say they do this in 1/8 of a page, and that turns into a minute because it's a description of something that ultimately takes longer to act than it does to write. And so I kept looking at the script supervisor's log, and it kept getting longer and longer and longer with each day. And I'm like, oh, this is getting interesting. So the first cut was about an hour 45. And I'm like, oh, I shouldn't cut anything, though. I don't want to cut anything. I want to show it to the director. I want him to see what he did. And then we can start working from there. It's one of my, it took me a while to sort of give in to this, but I feel like I want to give the directors everything they did in the best way I can give it to them, even if it means that I know this isn't going to live, or maybe these things don't need to be here, but it's not my decision right now to make. I don't want to make those decisions yet, although the decisions are in my head, they're ready to go. But I don't want to make them just yet. I say, well, we can discuss that later. And that takes a while to do, to have the confidence to say, all right, this is going to be a little long, a little this, a little that. But I know that the heart of the episode, which was the Frank and Bill storyline, had some of the most incredible sequences that I've ever been lucky enough to cut. And some of them have been adjusted just a hair here and there. And I'm just thrilled that, the work and sort of the emotion I was able to bring from my own self is present in this as well. And I think that's one of the sort of the things that Craig Mazin does so well, as he says to his artists, he goes, yeah, I wrote this, but I want you to bring your whole self to it. And I hope that by me giving you that the allowance to do that you'll enhance the thing that I already think is good on the page. And so that's what happened in this specific instance. And I mean, I can't tell you how happy I am with it. And, again, most importantly to me, there are people who are calling me up and saying, my mom is talking, and we're talking about it. Not because in a way, it's really about, and again, as a member of the queer community, I'm really, I'm very, very invested in this idea of your family, and the idea of family, and the idea of people you care for, whether it's your biological family, if it's a chosen family, or a family who has chosen you. And so I just love the idea that this is about how love is this great risk. That you risk loving someone else, even though it may be antithetical to your own survival. You're going to do something that could cause you to die, to be harmed, to anything. But that concept of being part of a family is worth it. And that's why I think that the show might be resonating a lot, is because it's this, again, it's almost like what is it, the Fast and Furious series? It's about family. So, and in a way, it works. It works because I believe it's kind of the crux of humanity, is how we form these tight sort of bonds with each other, even if it's across digital wires, as we're doing. But I don't know. I feel very I don't know. I'm just really honored that I got to be a part of this, The Last of Us, and to sort of bring the nuance and the subtext that I've kind of nurtured over the last 20 years of my career.
We're talking about here episode 3, yeah. and I mean that last shot, the final shot. I mean, wow, just it gets you. It gets you.
Sure does.
Is now your approach to, say, cutting like an episode like 103 that's maybe more heartfelt, different to say something that maybe has more of dread, suspense? We're seeing more the clickers and the infected.
Yes, and I did the pilot, and the next couple episodes are also mine and Emily, my assistant editor, and so those tasks are very different, but at the same time, I think what makes the series as cohesive as it is it always is based on the character and what the character is trying to either not do or the character is trying to do. So Joel is trying desperately not to be sort of like, I don't want to be connected to this girl. I don't need someone to die again. So I can't do that. I am emotionally unable to do that. But in spite of that, desire to not be connected, circumstances always put him in a situation where he instinctually acts. And that instinctual action is what I think makes it the story of his character, and the story of how his character ultimately, we'll see in the future, how he changes.
Well, you mentioned here episode 1, and I think we had a conversation over email about the cold open, because when I watched the cold open, it was it's this talk show, right? Yep. And but it was so, I mean, like when we then cut to the main title, and the episode starts, I mean, I'm already scared. I'm already nervous. I'm actually Googling if this stuff is true, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it was it was not the original cold open at all. Originally, there was a sort of a documentary style Planet Earth kind of thing that was edited together, because if I remember correctly, Neil Druckmann, who did the game, had seen this documentary, and who's like, oh my God, this is real and this is incredible. And that's what gave me one of these ideas. So we kind of wanted to recreate that sort of genesis of the idea for him. And it was interesting because, again, it's like you're seeing these things in nature do this stuff to ants and whatnot, and you're going, whoa, this is really terrifying. But it was also on a really small scale. And it also showed you almost too much of what was going on. And as I think Craig has said in the past, it was like social studies. You're like, oh, I'm in social studies class, versus seeing, a bunch of human beings talking about this thing. And you're sort of like wondering what that is. And you don't get to see it. You have to imagine what it is. And when you have to imagine what something is, it scares you more, because you don't know what it's like. And you're then now going, oh my God, these people are talking about something eating our, or basically infecting our minds and causing us to have mind control. And is it real? I don't know. And hence the fact that you had to Google it versus having seen it, in which case you would have known right up front that it was real. The fear of not knowing if it's real or not actually probably works better. So that was filmed very late in the season, near the end. And it was and I put it together in like a morning, and it was so fun because, John Hannah has to do like 5 pages of dialogue almost all in a row. So he was great. And the other guys were great too. But I think and the concept was, everything has to go very quickly in terms of how they're speaking up until the moment where he says, "What about things getting slightly warmer?" Editorially that works so wonderfully because you have these great close-up shots of all these characters, and then we had these extreme close-up shots of these characters, and wider angles and whatnot, and so we try to pop around, as in the early parts, just to show like the sort of the set the space, the tone of where they were, and sort of the feel of the studio. And there was a lot of chair squeaks and whatnot that we introduced into that to make it feel not so sort of austere, but like messy, like it would have been. And then when we get to that point, it becomes very, very specific. And I think the fun part of that is you get to focus the audience very, very closely on what's being said. And it's like one of the things I love doing, which is like just waiting and waiting and holding these great. I mean, and the performance in that take was amazing all the way through. And so I'm like, I should no, don't do it, don't do it. Wait. So I ultimately was like, I have to wait till this moment to go there, no matter what, because the architecture, the architecture of the scene will work best if I save it for the very end. And it was the way to do it. It really was. And then it slows everything down. Then the whole thing slows down. And this is something I learned back on the OC. So, which is so funny, because again, Norman's like, I'd like to keep this character talking, and I remove all their breaths, so that they don't have time to even breathe, which is inhuman, but it'll be better for the story. And then when I want it to breathe is when it's the most emotional. So these are things I learned, from the OC transferring all the way to The Last of Us, because it's the craft you learn along the way. And it just takes time. But that cold open, I think, works as well as it does because of that structure. And also because it allows you to kind of have that sinking feeling and it's also kind of fun because of the way Craig wrote it, which is like, oh, what if it gets slightly warmer? We're like, oh, that hasn't happened. So has it? Yeah, it has. So, okay, is this going to happen to us? And you go, yeah, it could actually. So it's a real possibility. And that's the thing. It's like, could it mutate? It might. So yes, it was a really great decision, and a risk to put like a bunch of guys talking, smoking on a TV show the first 3 minutes of your series.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that at all. Obviously,
no. Nobody was, and so that was kind of the fun part. We were all like kind of like, oh God, I hope it works, and they loved it. They were like, this is great. I just hope people are. Like, well, where's the cool things? It's like, no, contextualize everything. And as soon as you contextualize the experience, every scene after changed dread, as opposed to just as a normal scene, because now at any time, anything can happen. And so that contextualization is the heart of editing, is where you place things. And so moving that, if that were a scene that happened later, say, for example, moving it earlier would have been the right move. But, Craig and Neil are smart enough to know that has to be the first thing. So they wrote it that way. The
sound effects and the music, when we first see the clickers, I mean, right away, I'm like, I'm brought into the game, right? Yeah. Did you use a lot of, say, sound effects from the game, or you had access to those libraries? And also, I mean, you work with the great Gustavo Santaolalla, who did the music for the video game. Yep. But what was your approach to using, I guess, temp score and also the temp sound design?
That's really good. Temp sound design was accomplished by my assistant editor, Emily. It's one of the creative tasks that I love seeing if assistant editors are gifted in, and she happens to be immensely gifted in that ability. So she used a lot of stuff that was from her libraries that she had picked up over time. But then also when we were brought onto the series, they had these libraries of stuff from the game. So we were able to utilize those things. And when it came to the actual building of the final mixes, they had all of the Naughty Dog library of the sound effects. But not only that, they had the original artists who were the clickers, and they recreated those sounds with those original artists. And I know Craig, and I wasn't a part of this, but Craig would go to sound effects recording sessions, and they would work tirelessly to make sure that it was exactly right, to make sure that it felt exactly like it was in the game. Which he's like, I don't need to change that because it's perfect. I just need to replicate it in a way that's not just pure copying, and it works with what was actually filmed. So they would do copious passes to make sure that it worked just properly. The music is where I can speak to a little bit more. And the music is an incredible, I mean, music to me is, again, it's like this beautiful way to create this, the poetry of filmmaking is music in a way. And so having access to Gustavo's cues from the game was so inspirational, because it allowed me to look at all of these pieces of score, and having no knowledge of the game, I would use things as temporary pieces only because they moved me in a certain way. And a lot of what I had done as a temp scorer, and it's one of my big skills as an editor, is I know that I'm very good at temp scoring. This I know. Everything else is still an imposter. But temp scoring is something I'm really good at, and musical montage I'm very I learned as an assistant how to do that, and it's something that I love doing. So using that score and being able to mold things with that score and not really looking outside of that score. I mean, that was kind of the key. I said I don't really want to look too far outside of what Gustavo had done, because why? It's so perfectly suited to the world, to the feeling of the characters, and to the sense of sort of isolation, and sort of the beauty of the world that they are living in. And I think that's one of the things that makes the show sort of sing, is that you're seeing this sort of post-apocalyptic world, but it's a world filled with beauty, and it's a world filled with love, despite the surroundings and despite the circumstances. And that contrast is what creates a really sort of an interesting way to see into our own world, which in a way, if you think about it, can be similar. You know, it's like it always feels like we're falling apart, but then something you'll see will fill you with so much hope, and a feeling that we're all, you know, sort of here together, and to help each other. Then you feel the same, and you feel like, in a way, that nothing changes, even in a circumstance such as this. So yes, I absolutely loved the opportunity to use Gustavo's scores, and then he would make these just sickening, amazing renditions. The sequence with the strawberries last night, Gustavo special. And that's what they call him too. They call him Gustavo special. We need a Gustavo. And we just let him go. And he has just in such an intricate and beautiful way of creating these things. And he knows exactly he knows these characters, number one. I mean, maybe not Frank, because Frank wasn't in the game. But he does know, you know, the world, and he created the sound of that in a musical way. So I can't tell you, I mean, it's just an honor. I can't say more than that. It's an honor to work with the tracks. It's an honor to see what he does with them, and his team, and to be wowed when you hear them on the dub stage the first time. You just go, holy shit, that was great.
You know, speaking of the game, though, I mean, like, was there some pressure, though, to say, like, all right, we want to make the fans happy, but we're also trying to tell the best story here, make the best TV show possible?
I mean, the thing that I think they've done so well is the way they wrote these scripts. It was accessible to anyone. It was you know, you didn't have to play the game, and you know, they are not wrong. The game, the play of the game is what makes the game fun, as far as I'm told. So, having still not played it, And you can't really have gameplay in a television show. And so the ability to sort of shift the idea of the fun of the game being the play into a TV series where the fun is to be able to sort of experience what these characters experience, and to sort of live vicariously through them in a way that's not you actually controlling them, but watching how they react in a way that feels like you're with them. So it wasn't about like making. I mean, we were just always hoping, and this is from my perspective, like I was always just hoping that, if I like it, I hope other people like it too. And if you're a gamer and you're watching this and you're seeing things that have echoes of what you did as when you played the game, then victory. But as someone who knows that maybe a lot of people haven't played this game, I couldn't just assume that they would understand it. I had to understand it because I hadn't played the game. And then other people who had played the game had to understand it. So the discussions were actually quite few, in editorial at least. There may have been more that happened on set. There may have been more that happened in the writing process. But in post-production, it was like, let's do this. And again, it was like minor adjustments to what had been done. And I'll give you one fun story, actually. And this involves a later scene in the series, and obviously no spoilers. But there was a scene where Craig said, he goes, this one is like a really big key game scene. So maybe you should watch the scene first. Just maybe. It's a key one. And I said, oh, okay. And so I went away and I thought about it for a second. I said, you know what? And I went back and said, Craig, do you mind if I just try it myself first? I'll do it again. I'll watch it again. I'm just so curious as to what I would do differently. And he goes, yeah, go ahead. So I went away and I did the scene. And then I was like, okay, so now I'm going to watch the cutscene, which is, I think, the only cutscene I've seen. I watched it and I was like, it was so close. And I could not believe it. And it's not because of necessarily what I did, but I feel like it's because they had such a control of the cinematic world in the game that I came to the similar conclusions based on the story. Because again, I'm there to serve the story. And so my decisions were based on the story. And I think Neil's cinematic style is so romantic and beautiful, which is how I tend to try and work myself. So it was just so cool to see it matching up. And then I said, Craig, I did it the same. And he goes, no, you didn't. I said, I was really close. Really close. And he goes, all right, that's more like it. But yeah, so then we just made adjustments to that, but it was still, I felt good about it because again, I had brought it from myself first and then adjusted it based on what we needed it to be to just have those little minor adjustments to make sure it landed correctly for everyone else.
I have a question here from a member of the Hollywood Editing Mentor community, Haley Bentley. Cool. Talking about her and her dad are huge fans of the show. We're talking about, obviously, the suspense, right, in this series. She says, I'm curious how much footage they have to start with to give them the space to work with holding shots longer and creating those holding your breath moments. Do shots get held longer while filming for shows like this? Does that go all the way back to how the director is directing, or is a lot of that made in post?
That's a really good question. The way that it generally works, of course, is that all of those shots were designed to hold for a long period of time. In fact, most people would hope that you could design a shot to last as long as possible. And the ability to not edit is really important when you're trying to build tension, because as soon as you make an edit, you're calming the audience down in a way. You're basically telling them, oh, it's okay. New view, new view, new view. You don't have to worry. And there are so many ways to create, tension and stress. And one of those ways is to not edit and to force the viewer to almost endure the tension with the character. And as soon as you make that edit, you kind of relieve the viewer of okay, and then you have to build up that tension again. But if you don't make any edits, and you're lucky enough to be able to not make any edits, if the shot holds and has that sort of feeling that there's nothing about the shot that sort of dips for me at any one point, that I feel like I can hold on to those shots a lot longer. So they've designed those in the production, and A lot of it though is about me seeing when I can compress and seeing when I don't have to compress. In last night's episode, there was a whole sequence where Joel and Ellie are talking about what happened in Cordyceps and what happened in the past. There was coverage of that scene, and there was zero reason to make an edit because they were both great, and they never floundered, not once. And therefore, I was like, "There's no reason to make any edits here. So why? I'm not paid by the edit. I'm paid by the story. So, and again, it's not financial payment; it's emotional payment and the feeling of accomplishment. That's the thing that I care about the most. It's like, oh, this is so cool. I don't have to make an edit because it's so good. Yes, we had options to get around it because, as most great directors like Peter know, it's like, you never know when a piece of story is actually going to be no longer necessary, and we have to find a way around it. But certain sequences like that, and also when Ellie is approaching the infected character in last night's episode, it was important to not cut away too fast. It was to let her inch closer to this character and not ping pong, ping pong, ping pong, ping pong, because as soon as you start ping ponging, you get relieved. So I just like that we could sit on her and watch her sort of look at the character. And then when I felt at that moment that I really wanted to see what she was seeing, that's when you'd make the edit, because I'm like, well, if I'm feeling like I want to see this, the next thing, then I'm assuming the audience is going to want to see the same thing. So I have to think of myself as that surrogate audience member, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm, scaring the audience by not doing too much. And one of the big ways I think you create tension, and this is my own personal theory, maybe someone else has had it before, maybe someone else has not, but I like to keep a little 5-second suspense window open. And what that means is I want the audience to kind of be wondering what's happening in the next 5 seconds, a little bit, as opposed to showing them what's happening. I don't want to hold it off for too long, but in general, my theory is I like to have like 5 seconds of things the audience go, oh, I want to see this. And I keep this little 5-second window going the entire time I'm making edits. I'm like, well, the audience doesn't get to see this just yet. They'll see it in 5 seconds. So therefore, they're going to want to see it, which is going to want to keep them involved. So instead of seeing something and then seeing the character react to that said something, I would say, let's see the character react to said something first, and then reveal what that said something was. So the audience is going, what is that person looking at? And then you get to see it. And you go, oh, okay, versus the other way around. So I try and think about that at all times. It doesn't always happen, of course, but like in general, I try to keep that sort of that 5-second suspense window going at all times. And it's not suspense per se, it's just curiosity. Maybe we'll call it that. We'll call it the curiosity window. That's a pretty cool term. So,
coin it here.
So it's the 5-second curiosity window where it's like, I'm just curious. Like I feel like the audience will be curious and they won't feel like I'm manipulating them, and again, editors are manipulators. That's what we do, but I don't want it to be visible manipulation. I want it to be sort of invisible. And there's your invisible editor. I'm invisibly manipulating you, but I'm still manipulating you. So therefore I'm not invisible. If that makes any sense, but that's kind of how I like to sort of create sort of just general narrative tension, not just, sort of tension of if anyone's going to get hurt or die or whatnot like that. So yeah, curiosity window. There it is.
Pedro Pascal. Yeah, I've always just loved him as an actor. What can you say about, cutting those dailies?
I mean, here's the thing about Pedro. I mean, the guy is just a genius. And Bella Ramsey is just just a goddess, honestly. I mean, I just love her so much. But Pedro, the greatest thing about Pedro is I have to watch so closely what he's doing because he is doing so much internally and without movement. And so I'm like literally this when I watch his. I'm going like, I'm watching his eyes really closely because I know that in those eyes is where his emotion is buried. And I'm just really hyper aware of his thought processes. And, as the editor of a lot of these episodes, I've learned how to sort of see inside of the character that he's creating, and to see the choices he's making. And the choices he's making are about disconnection and connection, when he's connecting, when he's disconnecting. and when he's going to feel something frontal, when he's going to feel something turned away. And my job is to A, recognize it, B, emphasize it if I need to, or de-emphasize it as necessary. But seeing how he is sort of this character who's unwilling to change how he's become in the 20 years since his daughter has died, versus this just buoyant girl who's just so excited about a car. A car, freaking cool. So he's like, oh my god, so to see that contrast work together, and she's so open and natural and buoyant, and he's just is this rock who just desperately does not want to care. Future episodes we'll see how it all transpires.
Oh yeah, no, certainly can't wait. Tim, definitely want to start winding this down. I want to be respectful of your time. I gotta say, back when I was playing the first Last of Us, I remember like when I finished the game, I mean, I was emotional. I was like, I've never felt this from a game. Like, what is happening, right? And so what do you see, I guess, and I know it's not like a gaming podcast, right? But I mean, like, what do you see the future now of video games, and now, kind of, I guess this, where we're seeing now video games, translated more into TV shows and films, and just gaming, the popularity of gaming is just exploding, and it's becoming just like, it's just a bigger form of entertainment.
Yeah.
What do you see this kind of going down, I guess, the gaming kind of, Hollywood kind of relationship in the future?
That's an excellent question. And, what's funny about it is, watching how the games are made, and you see that they are able to integrate these real people, these real human beings into the games. And, I'm sure you heard, unfortunately, Annie Wershing passed away yesterday, who was the original Tess in the video game. And I remember seeing in some of the photographs of her yesterday, some of her work on Last of Us, and seeing in her eyes this pain and this humanity, and them being able to capture that into a video game scenario where they can create these unbelievable worlds and also inject this human experience with that at the same time, is why I think games have become so successful and so cinematic and so emotional. Because it's not just Mario jumping into a little tunnel and I'm popping on a little turtle, where you're just like you're sort of playing along as like this sort of silly sort of digital thing. You're really sort of in. It's almost like it's like a skin, they say. You're inhabiting these characters, and so you feel deeply for what happens to them. And in a way, I don't think I mean, the thing that I think works so well with how Last of Us has translated from a video game is because of the emotions and the humanity that the original actors had placed into the game, and how much people wanted to see that emotion and that humanity translate to the series. So for the future, I think again, like filmmaking is reaching all different areas, and gaming is certainly one of them where filmmaking can be almost as expressive as you possibly want, because the world can be anything. You can create any world you want, and then you inhabit it with people that are recognizably human, and that is the world, the fantasy world that is emotional. If that makes any sense to you, I think that's what makes it great. And I'm hopeful that in the future we have symbiosis between these two worlds, because I know that the Last of Us crew feels very connected to the gaming crew. We feel very close to them, and we feel like we're doing, I even say, I hope we're doing your work justice, because the work is so incredible that I'm really respectful of it. And I want to make sure it is done properly for you. And so far, so good.
So far, so good. Yes. No, we're still, we're not done yet. Right. And so, but so far, I mean, it's just been amazing. Cannot wait, obviously, for the next episode. And Tim, congrats again, from great work, and congrats on season 2.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was
so surprise.
Cool, especially coming on the heels of this episode, or right before this episode aired. I was like, oh my gosh, that's great because now I can a little bit relax because the episode was going to be controversial no matter what. It's deviates from the game. It's very, very different. And I'm just so glad and grateful that we get this opportunity to do it again. I love this crew. I love these people so desperately. They're just, again, the most human of people. And when you get the opportunity to do great work with the most human of people, I mean, that's the dream. So I couldn't be happier right now.
Awesome, Tim. Well, hey, just one last final thought from you. I mean, you're talking about mentorship, right? And you talk about, you've had a obviously lengthy career, successful career. Now, what would you say? Share some advice for those that are trying to go and make their way to the editing chair and do what you do.
Yeah, no, that's the best question. That's the way we should do this. For me, the best advice I can give anyone who wants to be doing this is if you're feeling like you're not getting something out of the people that you're around, do your job. Don't not do your job. Don't get disappointed. Don't get depressed about it. Don't stop doing your job well. Do your job as best as you possibly can. Pretend like it's the greatest job ever. Because you never know when some of these people are going to have their own things that they're going to want you on. And they may not be in the position to hire you at that point. They may be, writers, PAs that you're like, oh, I just hate, this person's nice, but never give up on the job you have. Do it as well as possible. I stacked Pepsis and got hot tea for that editor and brought checked lunches. I never missed, if I missed a lunch, I was like devastated and I would go back. Because weirdly, it's those small things that people remember that, oh, that's a responsible person. And so I feel like anyone who has the opportunity, and it's hard to get opportunities on these things. And again, like it took me 20 some years to just find my way into this position, which is a gift in and of itself. And it may not have happened and you never know. But the only way I can see someone doing really well and getting into those positions is to be, again, open to the opportunities and to truly just be super present for these people, to anticipate these people's needs, because in the end, that's mentorship is about others recognizing your own worth and saying, we want to help this person because this person's super great. And I feel Hollywood is full of these people. We're like an island of misfit toys. We were always sort of like misfits from the get-go. And so when we recognize other misfits, we're like, we got to bring them onto our island. And so the more you show that you're passionate about, being helpful and whatever that means. And I walked out with my big college degree and I was like making tea and I didn't care. So I was, it's great. I'm not going to be upset about this. And then just asking, you were saying, you got to let people know what you want to do. If I don't know that the PA and the writer's room is interested in post-production, then I will never offer my editing room, to sit in. I won't know it. And I may have had a great impact on that person and I would never know it. And you never know when people are going to be like, oh, you want to do that? Well, it just so happens that my friend is looking for you just don't know when that's going to happen. So in a way, it's like you're rolling the dice 50,000 times and you're hoping to get the right roll at one point. But if you don't roll the dice at all and you're hoping for the right roll, it's not going to happen. So the more times you roll the dice and surround yourself with different people, and while still being cognizant of the fact that you want to, complete your tasks for everyone. That's the way you sort of figure out where your people are. And so again, like I surrounded myself at a certain point, not surrounded myself, but I found the right people. And sometimes the right people found me. And I was lucky enough that they asked. And if they hadn't asked, maybe I wouldn't have had this opportunity. So you just don't know. So go, put yourself in a situation where you meet people, and sometimes it's not going to work. And sometimes they're not going to like you.
It happens.
And it happens. You go, okay, these are not my people.
Yeah.
That sucks. I don't regret it. I did everything I could. I did it all to the best of my ability. I did it with my heart. And now I'm moving on to something else because it's just the way it is. And, it's kind of how it is out here. Not everyone is for everyone. And that's okay. I think in the old, job world, it's like, oh my God, this person didn't like you and your career's over. It's like, not in Hollywood, it isn't.
No.
So you'll just find some other people that like you. So, and that's the sort of the beauty of meeting people. So, I'm just a big fan of people putting themselves in situations where they work for it. Like don't just expect things to happen to you. And in a way, that's what I was like in my early days. A little bit, I was like, oh, it's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to me. But as soon as I started to realize that if I just wait, it's not going to happen. I have to really actively try and make this happen. So try and fall and fail and get up. And you never know when the person you meet is going to be that next person. You just don't know. So it'll only be obvious to you later. So you just have to keep trying. And that's the best I can offer.
Well, that's just amazing advice there, Tim. And thank you for not only sharing that, but also your experience cutting The Last of Us. I mean, so awesome to bring us into the cutting room with this amazing series. And of course, can't wait for the next episode. And thank you for spending some time here, talking with me, being a guest here on the Hollywood Editing Mentor podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joaquin. I really appreciate it.